Well, welcome to and welcome. It's been a few weeks since we've seen you, Rabbi Joseph.
Yes.
Happy Hanukkah.
Sixth night tonight. Sixth night tonight.
And so, yeah, you decide we decided to talk because you thought it was important for um those who are not Jews to understand what the Hanukkah shooting at Bondi Beach in Australia meant, uh, how it's been perceived by Jews. And so let's start with this article that you sent me. It's entitled "The Bondi Beach Hanukkah Shooting Was an Attack on Judaism."
My colleague and good friend, Rabbi Jeff Salkin, whom we've used before, Jason,
Hmm.
helps contextualize and situate what the Jewish community continues to experience. And the reason I asked for this time is because you're during Advent and we'll be quickly embracing the days of hope, Christmas Eve and Christmas morning. And yet, I hope to God, no one in either of your churches will be afraid to attend.
Hmm.
You will not need to make sure there is more police protection. You will not need to worry about ushers and their preparation for a live shooter infiltration. And so when Bondi Beach occurs, and there was an intentionality, this is a huge area. Chabad, or ultra Orthodox, the rabbi murdered was wearing a black hat, had a long beard, wearing a suit at a beach, big 9-branch Chanukiah. People gathered from all over Sydney. There was an intentionality to make sure Jews gathered to the expression of celebrating Judaism would be murdered, having nothing to do with the state of Israel, having nothing to do with the war against Hamas, Gaza, Zionism. And this is what I've said in the 2 years since our dialogue began after October 7th. The goal of terrorists is to frighten Jews everywhere from the experience of their Judaism.
Hmm.
And Jeff Salkin adds at the end of his important passage, he wants to ask non-Jews, we need you to stand against hatred, against murder, and to state that to normalize anti-Jewish violence is to be complicit in our civilization's failure. He writes, each message I hear from my Gentile, I'll add, Christian friends, adds to the glow of the candles in my heart. Jason, I had no fear of asking you to have this conversation about the need to experience solidarity, to ask your congregation to understand that there is a synagogue in their city where parents were worried since Sydney about taking their children to the building.
Hmm.
One of the conversations I've had to have with my daughter, 7 years old, and one of the synagogues near us, major thoroughfare. So we drive by it a lot. And the other day we were stopped in front of it at a stoplight waiting. Jason, this is on Route 50. And my 7-year-old asked, Dad, why are there people with guns standing outside of the synagogue? And I mean, she's in church every week. And that's never a conversation we've had we talk a few times about cameras and locks, like, and it's usually tongue in cheek, like the pastor locking himself out of his office the Friday before Christmas, but it's never to the level of security in a way that is literally life and death um, for people to show up and worship. And it was just as a dad with a 7-year-old in the car having to explain it's heartbreaking. And so I can't imagine having to have the conversation week after week with a child as you walk into a house of worship.
When a synagogue was attacked on Yom Kippur in Manchester, my daughter called from New York, "Dad, is it going to be okay for me to take Ruthie, my 4-year-old granddaughter, to synagogue on Yom Kippur?" Those are not conversations that are exaggerated, terror-filled conversations. That's a normative reality in the Jewish community.
And Joseph, it's been a while since we've talked. Remind people, because I think part of these conversations are a product of how small and intimate the Jewish community is. Can you remind people of just the numbers?
15.8 million Jews in a global population of 8 billion. So we literally 6.5 million in Israel and maybe 7 million in America, and the rest spread out over the world. So 45,000 in Rio de Janeiro, where I live. So when something like Sydney happens, security is increased everywhere.
And so to continue on that, so it's part of the vulnerability, right? Is so I got my collar on right now, and it's not uncommon for people to say anti-Catholic things to me when I'm out and about. So of that 15 million, help people understand how many of those might be visibly Jewish in a way that makes them feel vulnerable.
Well, the Chabad, the Lubavitch, the Hasidic group that was targeted in Bondi Beach are a few thousand. Okay, they have revived a group that would have otherwise been destroyed in Eastern Europe. Most of them live in Williamsburg, in parts of Brooklyn, New York. So they have not assimilated.
There's some in Fairfax too.
Okay, so this is not a part of the Jewish community with which I engage. We might differ very strongly on many things, but when a rabbi who's 41, who leaves a widow and 5 children, all he wanted to do was offer the community at large the first light of the Hanukkah menorah, a festival that commemorates Jewish resilience and resistance against assimilation. And as Sulkin says, after 2 years of increased anti-Semitism and fear, we must not be afraid to light this Hanukkah menorah so that people see it. We must not be afraid to go out and share with the rest of the Jewish community. That is the goal of terrorists, of anti-Semites. That is why sustaining interfaith relations, that is why being able to pick up the phone and say, "Jason, can we have a conversation that continues the idea of interfaith solidarity?" Just think of that. In our age of polarization, what it means for a Jew, 2 Protestant ministers, to take a few minutes to say, we have the same God, we share the same need for safety in faith.
In this article, the rabbi, so he says the heart has 4 chambers, mine all holding different emotions after the shooting. In one chamber of my heart, there is profound sorrow. In another chamber, there is profound anger at those who minimize the meaning of the phrase globalize the intifada. And then he goes down to say, um, globalize means everywhere. That means there's nowhere on earth that Jews can feel safe.
And that is the goal, albeit ISIS, as we now seem to know, these two human beings motivated. ISIS is not anywhere near Hamas. Let's be critically honest. They share a hatred both of the state of Israel and Jews, but they're different. And Jeff will point out there was a Muslim, Ahmed al-Ahmed, who attempted to disarm one of the shooters.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate example of what Muslims should be. And we must deconstruct the hatred that terrorism has created over these last 25 years.
Hmm. This is not in the article you sent, but I've seen a number of articles lately. One in the Atlantic about how anti-Semitism on the far left and the far right is increasingly a phenomenon among the youth.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yair Rosenberg's article, I Panic Around the Young, attempting to interpret the data now drawn out. I spent a career committed to teaching at universities, ultimately leaving my pulpit after 30 years to teach at a state university that had been caught up in anti-Semitism. After Auschwitz, many Jewish leaders thought teaching, educating the future would be the solution to the indifference that permitted Auschwitz. I accepted that. I was committed to it completely. We didn't know what social media would do to change education. When you have a 6th grade default reading level, which is currently in America, you're not automatically assuming critical reasoning.
Mm.
And so what people learn on their phones is not what I could teach them in a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So the data didn't shock me. But I'm surprised that in the state of Minnesota, where I have lived and continue to teach, you cannot find a college course on anti-Semitism. What I constructed is gone. No university offers it. So even if my old belief of teaching were able to be implemented, where will you implement it?
So
Yes.
help people give people a little window into how you think about the season of Hanukkah and the sixth night in particular, in light of recent events in the last few years.
Hanukkah, this 9-branch candelabra called a Chanukiah or Hanukkah menorah, between 168, 165 before the Common Era. There was a civil war between the Seleucids, Ptolemy, that wanted all of the Judeans to follow the Greek faith. They desecrated the temple. A group of zealots, Hasmoneans, the Maccabees, fought back. At the end of 3 years, they won this little civil war, and they went to rededicate the temple. That is what the word Hanukkah means, to dedicate. Now we move from history to legend to theology. They went to light this using a small bottle of oil. and there was just enough for one night. Now we get into the syncretism of the winter solstice. It lasted 8 nights, the ninth candle being the helper candle that lights the rest. There are 3 biblical agricultural festivals that meet solar seasonal demands. Nothing for the winter. Let's add something for the winter, but exclude the 4 Maccabee books from the final text of the Hebrew Bible. So, we have this 8-day festival that reminds us of the needs for syncretism. We live in a world in which we are always the minority. You want to fit in, figure out how to live with the majority. They did. Hanukkah, like Christmas, another syncretistic time. We want to have light when it's dark. Northern Hemisphere bias. We continue to do that. Jews have always tried to fit in. Always. First translation of the Hebrew Bible, the Septuagint, from biblical Hebrew to ancient Greek. That gave access to what would become Christianity. We've always understood that the majority, post-Constantine Christianity, would always need to find a way to keep us at the edge. And we accepted, and we made our peace with it. We've gone through persecution, exile, tragically, the extermination of 6 million. We keep believing we are an eternal people that might be pushed to the edge, but will always be present. That is what I've been saying for the first 5 nights with my grandchildren, with my adult children and granddaughter on Zoom. That is what I'll say tonight. We will not be pushed out of the picture. We might need to find new allies. We might need to reconfigure what it means to live in a world of terrorism. We don't want to be afraid and silenced, but we have to be smart. We cannot be in places where our survival is put at risk. So,
Yeah,
How do you balance? How do you hold that tension of bearing witness to your faith in a very public way, Bondi Beach, very public space, and then also having to keep in mind the security, the safety of your community, and then which can force you to retreat back behind, the security of a sanctuary, of a synagogue, of safe space. What are those conversations like? What's that tension?
you can ask a rabbi in America how much they and their congregation spend on security, and you will be nonplussed by the amounts you hear, some of which are now supplemented by federal monies. I studied Buber for the hour before I got on this. One of my colleagues with whom I study Buber is a professor at the University of Alabama. There's a member of his congregation that is an Alabama state sheriff. They now park a marked police car in front of the little synagogue and Hillel house. Just like your 7-year-old asked, what are those men doing with guns?
Yeah.
Throughout Latin America, the security required after the 1995 bombing in Buenos Aires, you cannot walk into a synagogue off the street. You must go through sealed doors. My old synagogue has 2 police cars. I don't know if now they have armed police. Many congregations do. We have to live with the reality. The sages, the rabbinic sages taught the pikuach nefesh, the saving of a life, is greater than all other commandments. Would I tell any of my children, do not go to the synagogue? I would tell them if in their city there was insufficient security. I'm retired. I don't worry about what congregational rabbis, Hillel rabbis must face. And they must face it in a way that does not demoralize their commitment to be in the community.
That's the tension that I keep coming back to, and that I've wrestled with. Yeah, I don't even know what to say to that.
It's why I knew I could call Jason. It's why I stay in this relationship. Other relationships have ended since October 7th, but I will continue, no matter how long and in what way I need to model interfaith dialogue. So someone can ask me, what does it mean to live both with the necessity of witnessing who you are and the reality of terrorism?
Yeah, I've been rereading Charles Marsh's biography of Bonhoeffer the last couple of weeks, and and I knew this, but I had just forgotten it that so Bonhoeffer and his own family had Jews who had married into the family, um, and that was a microcosm of um, we have a certain idealistic picture of the confessing church, at least at its beginning, thinking it was standing up against um, the anti-Semitism of Nazism, but really, they were concerned not about Jews, but about Christians who were biologically Jewish, historically Jewish. So they weren't. It wasn't a concern for all Jews. It was a concern for Jewish Christians, and that I think that's a helpful reminder of where things were before. Um, and yeah, it's astonishing to me um, that Christians so lost the plot over centuries um, that could allow that to happen. And yeah, and in such a way that we need to be mindful of slipping back into
Look,
that.
Salkin says this is not just about Jews, but Judaism, which brings me to the third chamber of my heart, defiance. I think he's correct in saying for Christians to stand in solidarity against wanton global violence is to also say, we're next on the list.
And that's not something that the mostly white mainline Protestant church in North America has had to face. The black church in North America has had to face that throughout our history, throughout its history and our shared history. But that's not something we've had to face. I remember a few years ago in 2015, 2016, DHS put out a bulletin for churches on Christmas Eve, right? And the church I was at the time, we kind of took it tongue in cheek because one of the suggestions was having ushers hug people when they come in so you could feel for things on their bodies that weren't supposed to be there. And that felt kind of disingenuous, but that's not something we've had to really deal with. We more often than not, throughout our history, maybe not active today, been on the kind of the action end of hatred and violence towards other people. So that's not something we've had to face, and so I don't know if we know if we take it seriously enough. A statement like that.
Yeah, and I've said this before, but it's been it has been a while since we've talked, and I don't know when I said it before, but and this is not, I don't mean this in a the politics of the state of Israel vein, but I do think Christians have been very bad, uh, especially mainline Christians have been very bad at teaching people that yes, we have an obligation to the poor and the oppressed generally, but we have a specific obligation um, to Jews, to the synagogue,
Mhm.
without which our own faith is unintelligible. And so we have, I have a really an obligation to you, Joseph, that is unique and different from my obligation to anyone else of another faith. Um, and how that works itself out practically and politically is a different conversation. But we have to start from the fact that you know, as far as Christians understand it, Jesus is not fully embodied in the sacrament in worship on Sunday mornings because he's also present in the synagogue. But that's just what Christians have to say.
And here, I read before the last sentence in pericope 47 of part 2 of I and Thou. This is what confronts us immediately and first and always. And it legitimately can only be addressed, not asserted. So Buber is talking about you can't teach what it means to engage in honest dialogue. This is happening right now. We didn't practice this. We don't have a handbook. But if you're not open to it, you aren't ready for it. And in the polarization in which we live, in the constant degradation and disgust of so much of that polarization, we lose what Buber was instructing us.
Well, it's funny you say that. On Sunday morning, I was talking after worship with my friend Brad, and so he was commenting on how he didn't know about the Brown shooting, and his wife didn't know about the Bondi Beach shooting because on their social media feeds, his wife was only getting stories about Brown University, and he was only getting stories about Bondi Beach. And so, like we're being sorted into these lenses through which we see the world too, and that's incredibly problematic. Um, but Joseph, you said Christians need to keep you guys around, and so Tier Hardy, I am not preaching this Sunday, so I don't have to worry about it. But Tier Hardy is preaching, and
I am.
the lectionary passage assigned for the fourth Sunday of Advent is Isaiah 7. Again, the
That's
Lord
what I'm
spoke to
preaching on.
Ahaz. Again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, saying, "Ask a sign of the Lord your God, let it be deep as Sheol or high as heaven." But Ahaz said, "I will not ask, and I will not put the Lord to the test." Then Isaiah said, "Hear then, O house of David, is it too little for you to weary mortals that you weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the young woman is with child." It's virgin in the Septuagint. Like, look, the young woman is with child and shall bear a son and shall name him Emmanuel. He shall eat curds and honey by the time he knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the child knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land before whose two kings you are in, dread will be deserted. So, Rabbi Joseph, help Tear out or ruin his sermon.
Yeah, make some more. I'm supposed to be off today, so but let's find some work for me to do.
Look, I won't go into the 100 books about Betula and virgin young woman.
So
And
many boring books. So many boring books.
let's merely take the risk that Isaiah offers. You have to be open. You can't prepare for the sign that will lead you to an honest religious experience.
Yeah.
So a 10-year-old child whose family were driven out of the Ukraine, a Holocaust survivor who shielded his wife. How do we each share in the burden of living in an age of terrorism? Is there a sign that would help us understand that Bondi Beach, the Tree of Life Synagogue, a black church, all of these keep being given to us by the same God we all call upon with different words? How many different ways can I teach you? You're responsible for each other. I'm going to give a young woman who has no home a pregnancy that will be eternally questioned. Let's see what you guys can do with that.
I was rereading a passage in Robert Jensen's Story and Promise this week, and he begins the chapter saying that the second article of the Nicene Creed, for us in our salvation, it should begin with a nevertheless, nevertheless for us, because he quips that you can't look at the state of our world or its history and easily conclude that Jesus' father is responsible for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think as I'm listening to Jason read that, as a fellow clergy person, maybe I would preach, this is a sign of how much uncertainty I'm going to require of you.
Yes.
You want certainty? I won't give it to you. The very nature of what you celebrate on Christmas is the uncertainty of an origin.
I mean, that's right, because for us, Isaiah 7 is paired for this Sunday with Matthew 1 and the Annunciation to Joseph. And, and I think a lot of quote unquote religious people have transactional understandings of God kind of in their heads. And if I try to be faithful, then God will do X or Y for me. And if I'm suffering, then it must be, I'm doing something wrong. But Joseph is singled out as a righteous man. And that righteousness for him means he has to take this woman whose status will be questioned. And so he has to suffer that shame. And he dies in obscurity. That faithfulness looks like suffering. Same with Mary. Like, she abides with him, with Jesus, but she does so to his cross.
And look, there was no opportunity living in Rio de Janeiro for me to find something that would put me in a crowd with hundreds or thousands of Jews. But I know lots of people in New York who sought that opportunity out. That we will not be denied the opportunity to be Jews. So in the face of uncertainty, you have to push forward. That is who this woman represents. Not her status as a virgin, but the origin of the mother of Jesus is uncertain. What are you going to do with that?
And we spend so much time on that quibbling between young woman and virgin that I think we lose sight of what you just said. Because, frankly, talking about someone's past sexual history or not is more exciting than wrestling with the more difficult question of where is God in the midst of Ahaz's doubt? Where is God in the midst of our doubt? And what on earth is God doing then? And what in heaven's name does that mean for me 2,000 years removed with the world coming apart at the seams?
And it's this is something Joseph and I have talked about before. It's we're incredibly bad readers of the Bible, right? Um and the so the ancient church chose to interpret Isaiah 7 the way that they did, not because they're reading the story left to right, front to back, but because Jesus was raised from a virgin tomb. And it's that story that then determines how you see the previous stories. And so everything's retrospective, which, Joseph knows because Genesis is not the first book of his his story, despite the ordering of the so-called Bible.
Look, maybe just the ability for me to have called a friend, can we engage right now? Is the opportunity to model what it means to live with uncertainty today.
Mm.
You have to take the risk. You can't be pushed aside by, well, maybe Jason will be too busy. What will I say if, how will I get this question out there? It's still about the relationship.
Yeah, I remember. So last year, I spoke at Olam Tikva synagogue near here, and then I spoke to their youth group. And yeah, I had to. I was expecting security, but the degree of the security was remarkable. But I remembered thinking, because of Joseph, that it's incredibly important for me to receive their questions as non-anxiously as I can, and not to and not to put myself in the position of correcting anything that they say. Uh, that 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 posture of trying to build relationship is more important than anything else I might say or do.
Look,
And I think,
Bondi Beach, Brown University, the horrible double murder of Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, all constructs of living in radical uncertainty. We can't be afraid to have children who face mental illness. We can't be afraid to send our kids to a university to study for finals. And we can't be afraid to be Jews. We all have to find a message, both of resistance, resilience, and the risk of being in relationship with people who still care.
and Isaiah 7 mentions this. This shall be a sign for you. It's so much of Christian curiosity about Jews, right, is the particularity of the law, um, and not understanding that so much of that particularity is so that you are set apart, Joseph, in a visible way as as a Jew. Like that's what, like, God wants you to be visibly distinct, from the rest of the world. And part of that, I think, only now do I appreciate is an incredible vulnerability comes with that too.
And you have to be careful that you don't pass it to your children and grandchildren, that you stay aware, but that awareness does not itself become obsessive withdrawal and isolation.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
And I
now I'm
think,
rewriting my sermon, so thanks, guys.
Just you can call your rabbi whenever you want.
Well, it's
Only if
yeah,
I can open it with the joke of, two Methodist ministers and a rabbi jump on a Substack call Friday morning.
Please, please.
it's too early for a bar.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm gonna. What have we forgotten to talk about, Joseph?
There is grief in Sydney. There is grief that um, will last in a way that is difficult to explain because the question why did this happen, will offer us no solace. How? How do we live with this in a way that does not fill that quadrant that Jeff speaks about: anger, isolation, resentment? We have continued work to do. The issues around Israel and Zionism, this current Israeli government, and its horrific, terrible handling of circumstances initiated by a terrorist group. That will require decades, long beyond our conversation. We must be able to mourn. And I don't know how long they will be mourning in Bondi, in Sydney, Australia, any more than I can't imagine how long the Reiner family, extended family, will be able to cope with life itself. We must move beyond our obsession with why. We must help each other with how you construct the how. How are we going to live in a world where security is needed for synagogues to function? How are we going to reconstruct and restimulate Jewish-Christian relations after 2 years of bitter polarization politically, in a zeitgeist in which we lack leadership at the highest levels, modeling, civility?
Hmm.
How? So we will get through Hanukkah for 3 more nights. I pray that the two of you will bless your communities with wisdom and insight in Christmas. We have to keep engaging because the zeitgeist would push us all apart. There are too many other things that will capture us.
Man.
So, to your, what changes are you going to make to your sermon now?
Well, I mean, I was talking a lot about doubt, and with Ahaz, where's the line? Talking about. I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull up my Word document here, and I'm like, I feel like my great grandmother trying to use an iPad today. Um, that Ahaz, isn't a villain. He's not someone who's lacking faith or anything, but he's a mirror because we all have doubts. He's skeptic. The source of his doubt is his fear in trusting that God does not operate in the ways that he wants. And I think that talks about the certainty the rabbi was just mentioning, right? That like we want God to operate with certainty. Um, and we want the world to operate with certainty. When those two things don't happen, or what the way God acts is not what we want in that moment, I think I think that's where I'm gonna dive more into this.
And we live in a world in which political polarization and terror are aware that more chaos, more instability, more fear
Yeah.
marginalizes all the Ahazes.
Well, and to Jason's point earlier about with talking about Brad and Brad's wife not knowing these two different things had happened, whether we know it or not, we're being put in, we're being separated digitally And because our world is now a digital world, that ship has sailed. It is what it is. If we are not aware of that separation that's ongoing, that's being forced to us, or we're opting into because of how we choose to engage digitally, we're missing a whole part of the world. We're missing. That I would miss an entire experience that another human being is having in the midst of tragedy, horror, sadness. Uh, that's problematic too. And to say that it's the algorithm or it's this digital world, and there's nothing I can do about it. Well, no, there is. There's these types of conversations. There's putting down social media and reading, like Jason reading a book again because you have it. Hearing someone else's story, doing the hard work of having a conversation where you can just sit in silence because you don't know what to say, and trusting um, that God is present and that God's going to move among the three of us in this digital space, um, and do something that perhaps is uncertain, and that's okay.
And not just uncertain, but it's, the Hanukkah story is a reminder of the dark context that the Christian story begins in, right? Because the story, the story of Judas Maccabeus creates messianic expectations that are then imposed upon Jesus at the big, during his ministry. That when he throws his temple tantrum, people make assumptions about what he's going to do next, precisely because of the stories that have come before. And so, that as Fleming Rutledge says, Jesus is born with monsters at his manger. And that, in Luke's telling of the story, it's Caesar imposing a census on the people that gets the story started. And that's a means of control. And wanting to control outcomes that God condemns in the Christian Old Testament, precisely for that reason. So it's the story emerges in this dark time where evil people are trying to control history.
I just jotted this.
All face life in ways for which we have little control.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a shared human experience. So if you've ever thought I have nothing in common, like what does a Protestant minister in just outside DC have in common with a Jew in Australia? There it is. We all have it.
And every once in a while, the Holy One requires that we stop. We stop. And we reflect. We think about our thinking. We're not engaged in creating a product. We're engaged in being present to and with each other. That is a blessing. That produces light. That helps me tonight finish the 6th night on Shabbat. Am I afraid? Sure, I'm afraid. But a little less afraid because 2 people took the time to stand with me and attempt to understand the uncertainty of being a Jew in December 2025.
And that's something that AI can't generate. So there you go.
Nope.
Mm-mm.
Are there, I just meant that as a joke, but I'm curious now. Are there conversations in Judaism about AI?
Oh my gosh. That will require 2 or 3 other conversations. You bet.
Okay. Because it seems like United Methodists, as United Methodists are wont to do, just have, uncritically adopted the latest technology and will quickly become part of the Borg.
Well, I have some questions to ask those who made that decision.
Well, Joseph,
You should come to the training day we have next month, where
Oh,
AI
I'd
is
be
going to
more
be
than
featured.
happy to.
We're not going to talk about the ethics of it. We're going to talk about productivity.
Oh, no, 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 no,
God
no,
wants
no.
you to be more
No,
productive.
no product until accountability
Ooh.
for decision making is discussed.
Yeah, yeah.
I just wanted to get Jason going.
It's like we're all gonna watch the Terminator first.
That's why if you use
one and
AI,
two.
use your manners and be polite, so that when the machines uprise, like in the great movie Mitchell's versus the Machines that my kids love, you will not be viewed as a threat. They won't take you out.
Tira's seen hardly any movies, but Mitchell's versus the Machines. He's
Such a
seen
good
that one.
movie. It's so good. I might watch it this
I
afternoon.
sincerely pray that your sermons and your open hearts lead your communities, and that the hope that comes from Christmas will be a source for all of us everywhere for less fear, more relationships.
Thank you. Amen.
Well, we'll see you. We'll see you soon, Rabbi Joseph. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.